All right, hello. Back with some more videos. So we're going to be doing something, or actually a couple things a little bit different today. First of all, you might have noticed that the visuals, the cards, my Moto client is much bigger. I'm trying kind of reversing my monitor setup, so hopefully this is a bit more readable, a bit more visible. It does make it a little bit awkward for me to play matches, since I have to be like looking to the right and like I don't know, but whatever. It's not a big deal. If this is like nicer and more readable in terms of cards, I can definitely do this. And so today we're actually not going to be playing any matches. I want to kind of talk about a few different pieces of Ad Nauseam theory for a little bit. And so I'm going to separate this into a few different parts. So I'll put this up as like part one, part two, part three. Part one, I just want to talk a little bit about kind of like the classical combo deck theory of consistency versus resilience versus speed, and how we should be thinking about that when we're brewing all sorts of different NOS lists. The second thing I want to talk about is just like some general tricks and tips, that type of stuff. And then the third thing I want to talk about is techniques for playing through hate. So I'll kind of split this roughly into those three pieces. I also kind of want to take a minute to plug a like a sideboarding guide thing that I made at some point. So that's here. I'll put a link in the video description. But I wrote this whole giant thing kind of like at the beginning of July, as a just kind of as notes mostly for myself, but then ended up expanding it into a bit more of a guide. It's not really a sideboard guide in the traditional sense of like telling you what you should board out, what you should board in. Really, it's like I like put a card, I talk about the card, and then I kind of try to give you guys the tools for designing your own sideboards for any type of meta. So one of the things I don't really love about sideboard guides a lot is that they get outdated pretty easily, and so hopefully this will be something that can kind of last and stand on its own. I don't know why I didn't think about advertising it earlier. I guess I just never did. But yeah, so that'll be linked, and then you guys can check that out if you want. I can definitely make a video at some point about sideboarding in general as well. So I guess that's no, one more administrative thing before we get to the content for the day. I wanted to get a little bit of feedback on what types of content you guys want to see most. So I know I've been doing a lot of brewing lately, like I did the Orzhov list, and I did the Stirrings list, both of those with Ryan Scott. And I thought those were pretty interesting. And one of the next things I wanted to run was this Bring to Light list, where we're kind of running the Sakura Tribe Elder Search for Tomorrow package from my original Masterminds Acquisition Abzan list, but with a heavier white slant and kind of using Glittering Wish in that Masterminds Acquisition slot, because Masterminds Acquisition was very clunky a lot of the time with Phyrexian on life, because you might have had like 5 mana on turn 3, but you didn't have 7 mana in order to play both to set up a turn 4 kill. Fortunately, Phyrexian Unlife plus Glittering Wish is that 5 mana that we need on turn 3. And if we're running Glittering Wish, we should probably be running Bring to Light, and all of the basic land fetching allows us to just play a very minimal blue and red splash and still be able to pretty consistently find it in order to hit Bring to Light. So this is a version that I'm really excited about trying out. I also have a Wilderness Wreck version that I am interested in trying out at some point. This probably needs a little bit more refining. I don't know if it should be this with the Pentad Prisms or a list with Growth Spirals instead. Those are kind of the two ideas that I'm floating back and forth between at the moment. But for now we're going to talk theory. So I think I will at some other points put up more theory type discussions like what I'm about to go into right now. I'll keep going with some of the brews. I think I will every now and then, though, kind of return to a stock list and just give that a playthrough, since I do think it is useful to still see gameplay from like a pretty stock list, but I feel like that can get a little bit dull or boring fairly quickly. And then last but not least, I can definitely just like play other decks. When I think I made an Ant video at one point, but I also play like Legacy Storm, I have Modern Storm, and I really should pick up the pieces for Twiddle Storm online since I already have most of it because I have like Modern Storm, so I have the expensive stuff. Anyway, so first things first, combo decks: consistency, resiliency, resilience, and speed. So we can kind of think about those three things as like the basic stats of our combo deck. So, you know, we can invest some amount in speed, and maybe that comes with a trade-off of resilience, or maybe we're really consistent, but we're not that fast. An example of a deck that focuses a lot on speed and isn't particularly resilient might be something like Neoform in Modern. It kills you on turn 1, turn 2, stuff like that, but it tends to fold to a bit of interaction, a bit of hate. Something at the opposite end of the spectrum might be like, let's say, High Tide in Legacy, where High Tide, it's really consistent. If you give it enough time, it's going to go off. It's just all cantrips. It's pretty resilient. It has Cunning Wishes to find answers to hate and stuff like that, but it's not the fastest deck. So generally, we can think about these three categories as things that we trade off between. And it's not that there's a clear-cut best thing to have. It's not like being the fastest deck is always best. An excellent example of that is Legacy Belcher, or even Legacy TES versus Ant. Belcher's the fastest of those. TES is a bit faster than Ant, and then Ant, but that's kind of a misconception as well. Ant's like maybe half a turn slower. It's really not much slower at all. But being faster doesn't necessarily make it better, because in a meta, you have to play against other people's decks. You have to play against opponents, and those opponents are going to be trying to stop you, and that's where you need to have some consistency and you need to have some resilience in order to actually pick up wins in real tournament settings when things aren't just goldfishing. So where does Ad Nauseam kind of fall on that spectrum? Ad Nauseam it's fairly consistent. Well, it's probably not the most consistent combo deck possible. We've all had those games where you're just kind of sitting there saying, all right, now I need to draw an Ad Nauseam, and you just never draw it, and then you lose. And so that's the deck kind of hitting its fail rate, and the fail rate could be thought of as part of the consistency of the deck. Is the deck speedy? Kind of. Ad Nauseam actually makes use of an interesting idea here. I mean, it's a turn 4 deck that has a turn 3 kill. A lot of other combo decks have like turn 3 kills, but Ad Nauseam has combo pieces that inherently stall for time. So these Phyrexian Unlifes and these Angel's Graces, those are pretty good at slowing the opponent down, especially if they're playing an aggressive creature deck, which is in some sense almost another way of getting speed. Like, sure, you could be faster, but you could also make your opponent slower. And then resilience. Ad Nauseam is actually fairly resilient. There's not too many things that just outright turn the deck off or hate the deck out, which is one of the really nice things about it. It just is unfortunate that one specific thing that turns the deck off, Meddling Mage, is something that sees a lot of play in a specific strong modern deck right now. But Ad Nauseam, I would say it's reasonably consistent, it's reasonably resilient, and it's reasonably fast. It doesn't really excel in any one of those categories, but it's not really terrible in any of those categories either. It's kind of a jack of all trades when it comes to categories like that. But that doesn't mean Ad Nauseam isn't without its inherent advantages. Going beyond that consistency, resilience, speed paradigm, you have specific facets of any particular deck that make it do well in certain situations or line up well against certain things. And I kind of alluded to this already by talking about the white cards, Angel's Grace, Phyrexian Life. They mean that Ad Nauseam generally has a very good matchup against aggressive creature decks, like something like Zoo or something like Burn. Burn, not really a creature deck, but Unlife reading as a life gain card there is very good. Something like maybe Hollow One in less for Burning Inquiry. Something like the current iterations of Hogak without Altar of Dementia. Decks like these that are just trying to put a lot of power on the board and then kill you, these are decks where Ad Nauseam definitely shines. Another big advantage of Ad Nauseam is its instant speed combo. Very few decks can kill the opponent on their own turn when they have tapped out to play a 4-drop or something like that. And putting that pressure on an opponent where you have 6 mana and so they just can't tap out for the rest of the game or else they lose, especially if they're playing counter magic. That's a really powerful thing, and understanding how to leverage that is an important thing to do and something that goes a long way towards learning how to play against control and learning how to pick up wins against control. Another big advantage of Ad Nauseam is it's not dependent on categories of things that are easily attacked for the most part. So namely, like, we don't play creatures, so removal is dead against us. We don't use the graveyard, so graveyard hate is dead against us. Having no reliance on a certain category of card and therefore blanking large chunks of your opponent's interaction is something really nice to do. Storm, while maybe it's a little bit faster, makes use of creatures, and so it is potentially susceptible to removal. It also makes use of the graveyard, so it's potentially susceptible to graveyard hate. Neoform, potentially susceptible to like a timely Path to Exile or something like that. Now, not to say it can't just like continue going off in response, but it does make things a little bit harder. And then finally, one further big advantage is a lot of hate just slows Ad Nauseam down. It's not lights out. So the deck is fairly capable at playing through a large amount of the possible hate effects we could face. And again, with the exception of like Meddling Mage or maybe Gaddock Teague. But for the most part, we can just play right through it. It just adds a requirement of having a bit of extra mana. So all of that comes together to combine into a deck that kind of does a lot of things average, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It comes down to knowing, I guess not knowing, in order for Ad Nauseam to be good in a particular instance, what we want to be on the lookout for is situations where those inherent advantages are relevant and good. So when there's a lot of decks where Phyrexian Unlife in particular is not something they can answer and is a very, very powerful card, it's times like those when Ad Nauseam is probably at its best. And I do kind of think that we are starting to be in one of those times right now, at least for the next couple weeks. So Hogak will eat a ban probably at the next BNR announcement. But until then, we're seeing a lot of Hogak, we're seeing a lot of burn. Yes, there's some blue-white control. But I think the meta right now at large is actually pretty positive for Ad Nauseam. Again, for the next couple weeks. And we'll see where we go in the future. After that, meta will need time to shake up and stabilize again. But what we want to be looking for in any potential future meta, when figuring out how to attack it, is, are our white cards good? Is our ability to not rely on the graveyard or not rely on creatures a big deal right now? Stuff like that. And those are sort of the things we should be looking out for. Okay, so that's gonna kind of do it for this first part. Really, where I was talking about consistency, resilience, and speed. Oh no, it's not. It's not gonna do it at all. I missed completely on one of the major things I wanted to talk about, which was how do we make use of that idea in tuning a deck. So, for example, with some of the Abzan versions, like this one that I tried out in a previous video with the worm coil engines, or this one where we have the ramp spells and no ancient stirrings, we don't have cantrips. And cantrips are something that adds to the consistency of the deck. Right? So these, while not actually being combo pieces, give us an improved likelihood of finding combo pieces. So if we are not running these cantrips, what we need to be doing is we need to have some other way to improve our consistency. So in this Abzan version, I've added Mastermind's Acquisition and some card draw and Night's Whisper in an attempt to do that. In this Abzan version, we've added the Ancient Stirrings, and I've added these Worm Coil engines to hopefully turn these Ancient Stirrings into a payoff, something that is a threat, something that improves our consistency. So even though it's not directly a combo piece outright, it's still a thing that we can find that is powerful and something to do. In the Orzhov list, we're playing Scheming Symmetry as additional combo pieces, and that way we just have a higher raw number of combo pieces, so perhaps we are not as likely to need to cantrip in order to find one. We will naturally draw them more often. I think it's very, very important to realize that Abzan or Orzhov lists that don't have more combo pieces than the Esper version does are kind of doomed before they even get off the ground, because they're just lower consistency than the deck we already have, and we're not really gaining anything in speed or resilience for that. So in some sense, lists like that just have worse stats than the Esper version. I guess hopefully that makes sense. So when we're brewing, when we're building other lists, we should look at them with an eye towards keeping the consistency at least equal to, if not better than, the Esper version. In my there we are. So in my Bring to Light list, our consistency is improved by playing a greater raw number of combo pieces. In the Wilderness Reclamation list, we're playing some more searching, and we're also playing. not searching. We're playing still some cantrips, and we're also playing an increased density of combo pieces with Mystical Teachings. And this is an idea that you will see present in all of my brewing. Every single one of these lists, Turbo Maniacs is something entirely different, but every single one of these lists is tweaked in a way that doesn't have worse consistency, or is trying not to have worse consistency than the stock Esper list. And each of them are, for the most part, an attempt to improve the resilience without lowering the consistency or the speed. It's going to be a bit hard to do too much better than a turn 4 as sort of our average combo turn with an Ad Nauseam deck. We need to get 6 mana to combo, and asking for 6 on turn 4 is a lot more reasonable than asking for 6 on turn 3. And so if we look at these other brews, we look at the Wilderness list. Well, what is this trying to do? It's trying to combo on turn 4 with Ad Nauseam Angel's Grace, or on life Ad Nauseam. And it's trying to do it in a way that is just as consistent as the original version, by playing more combo pieces and still having some cantrips. So it's looking to be just as fast, just as consistent, and be more resilient. So how is it more resilient? Well, this Mystical Teachings package allows us to find various answers to problems that we might face. Discard, we can find a Torrential Gearhulk or another copy of the combo. Against a deck like Humans, we can find this Consume the Meek. Against a permanent piece of permanent base state, we can find Abrupt Decay. We have Remand, because Remand lines up nicely alongside Wilderness Reclamation. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces of interaction main deck, and these Mystical Teachings, which could sort of count as a piece of interaction as well. This is way more interaction than Ad Nauseam usually plays, and hopefully by adding interaction, we improve our resilience, we improve our ability to fight through what other decks are doing. If we take a look at this Stirrings list, so this Stirrings list is looking to, well, it's kind of doing two things. I think this is actually probably the weakest list out of the experimental lists I have here, but I would say it's almost looking to improve consistency, even by cutting cantrips, by finding the artifact mana more quickly, and then also having alternate threats to deploy. And having alternate threats to deploy is not just a way of improving consistency, it's also a method of improving resilience. Because if they turn off our main combo of Ad Nauseam Angel's Grace or Ad Nauseam Phyrexian Life, then we can just instead find a Worm Coil and start beating them down with it. So maybe their Damping Sphere or whatever nonsense they have doesn't matter anymore. Not that Damping Sphere turns off Gnaws, which I'll talk about in a later video as well, but it's, you know, just if they're attacking Ad Nauseam too hard, then they just die to Worm Coil Engine, and that's kind of a form of improving our resilience. The Orzhov list, again, we're trying to stay just as consistent, if not more so, by playing these Scheming Symmetries, playing a higher density of combo pieces. We're trying to stay just as fast, and what we're trying to do here is improve our, well, no, I'm sorry. This list isn't attempting, well, it's kind of attempting to improve resilience by playing more pieces of interaction. We have 7 interaction pieces between the silences and the Pacto Negations, but it's also trying to improve our consistency by running these additional combo pieces. So this one I would say is looking to improve consistency. But it also gains some resiliency in its land base. We're not as susceptible to Blood Moon because we have 5 basics. We have some removal in the form of these Ifnir Deadlands. We have a bit of hate in Blast Zone and Bojuka Bog. All of these are ways of improving resilience, as well as consistency by having a 2-color mana base that has a lower fell rate. Bring to Light list, again, I think I said here, it's definitely an attempt to improve consistency. It's also kind of an attempt to improve resilience because Wish can go get various answers from the sideboard, so we're essentially on 8 pieces of interaction main deck. And again, playing a lot of basics, so even in the land base, this is something that could be thought of as improving resilience against things like Field of Ruin or Blood. And then finally, this list, we're looking at playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 interaction pieces. So we're increasing our number of interaction pieces. We're making ourselves less susceptible to things like artifact removal, and we're trying to do so while still maintaining our speed and maintaining our consistency. I think one of the problems with this one is it doesn't quite maintain the consistency enough of the turn 4. So I think this is not quite good enough as an Abzan list. The Masterminds acquisitions are sometimes great, but they aren't great all the time. So when we're looking at Brews, which are the trendy hot thing at the moment, I guess, we want to be thinking about what is this doing better than the stock Esper version? And when we're brewing, we should be doing so with an eye towards how is this improving on the stock version? Is it faster? Is it better able to play through hate? Are we more consistent in our combo? And if the answer to all 3 of those questions is no, then honestly it's probably not the greatest brew. And I get that brews are fun to mess around with. I have a lot of fun messing around with them as well. But we do need to kind of be realistic here in evaluating them, in the hopes that when or if and when we do eventually find a really good one, and then maybe we improve the deck as a whole, or maybe we innovate, or not maybe we innovate, we would have already innovated at that point, but that is how innovation happens. Okay, cool. So I know I said we were done like, I don't know, 10 minutes ago or something, and then went back and talked about all this, but now for real this time, we're done with part 1, and I'm gonna jump back in a minute with part 2.